All right, everybody. Thank you and welcome back for another amazing episode on Modern Day Prophets Rising from Soul. You guys, I am unbelievably I am beside myself with how excited I am for this conversation. This has been a conversation in the works for the last 2 years, and I am so excited to introduce this guest. This gentleman was a man that I had picked up while I was Ubering. And within about 5 or 10 minutes, we actually got into a God-conscious conversation. I don't know how in such a short amount of time we got into this level of depth, but there was an immediate heart energy that this man carried. And when he told me that he was actually the actor that played Michael Myers, my mouth hit the floor. You could not have paid me enough to be able to have guessed that from this conversation was a man that played this character. And so I knew that I wanted to have another conversation with him and get his perspective on how he bridged that gap from his values and his excellence to playing a character that can perceived as our shadow side, that can be perceived of the worst of human beings. So let me introduce James Jude Courtney, and let me just tell you, I am so excited for you to be here today. Thank you.
So good to be here. So good to see you again. I'm stoked.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Well, and the world has changed quite a bit since I saw you last. I think the sort of how we kind of got into the conversation of the depth of unconditional love that we were talking about, and just the quantum of that. We are talking about the expo that I was putting on, that Mind, Body, and Spirit Expo, and we just kind of jumped in the conversation from there. And so, coming from a perspective of that, and coming from a perspective of the depth that you've had, not only to the character that you've played, first off, tell me how this experience, COVID-19, has affected your life.
Oh, wow. Well, the broadest thing is that I had like 6 conventions canceled. And
Okay.
Conventions are, really important. I mean, they're really important in terms of, it's part of my livelihood, yes, but more importantly is the opportunity to connect with some of the most beautiful people in the world. And horror fans are just the kindest, most considerate people I've ever consistently run into. And so, instead of going out and being able to shake hands and give hugs and take pictures with people, they've been canceled. And so this is really like my only opportunity to connect with, all these beautiful people that I've grown so accustomed to it. It feeds me. I mean, literally, it's like drops of love all day long when I do a con. So, I get to meet these beautiful people. We have just short exchanges, but like the conversation you and I had, you can pretty much gauge immediately where somebody's at, and, meet them where they are. A little bit of love, a lot of love, healing. And it's, so being confined has given me the opportunity to do a lot of introspection and a lot of work on myself, a lot of healing. It's not been an easy time, but it's been a good time.
Yeah. I think my motto for this time is it was tough, but it taught me. That's my new model, and I'm actually taking that and going back through my entire life. But it's being able to say that mantra, because there's I think on an impact of this level, we're only beginning to understand the ripple effects that this is going to have, and it's the film industry, the industry, any industry where we gather. So many across the board, it's been impacted. So it's really been a time too that, not that we're all going through the same experience, but we're going through the same disruption in some sort of way. We're going through some sort of disruption in our normal.
Well, I think what we're, experiencing is entropy, and the law of the universe is entropy precedes creativity. Mm-hmm. So things have to break down. Things have to create the fertilized, rich mulch that something new and beautiful is going to grow out of. We happen to be in that chaotic time right now. And how we define ourselves and define our lives is going to be, is setting the stage for the world that we're going to choose to live in, that we're choosing to create. So I see a lot of beauty and I have a lot of hope. An astrologer friend of mine who's incredibly correct, I mean, about a lot of things. And of course, some things are, just probabilities that he says, that he tells me about. I've known him for 35 years.
Okay.
He told me that the aspect on the planet right now that we're under hasn't been here since 38 BC, when the Egyptian pharaohs tried to corner the entire economic planet.
Okay.
And he said, so basically, this could be viewed as a sort of a spiritual war that happened, and that basically the 1/10 of 1%, the Illuminati, the whatever you want to call these guys,
Right.
on some spiritual level. I mean, this is all really. I mean, this is the way he relates it to me, and I think it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
He said, okay, so this was the final push for whatever these energies are, is to finally just gut the middle class, kill off the useless eaters, old, sick, minority, third world, with all these eugenicists who want to diminish the population. And again, I'm just
Absolutely.
sharing what my friend shared.
Mm-hmm.
But and this is why I'm sharing it. He said, but they lost. He goes, so what you're going to see over the next 5 years is this trend towards equality in income between the genders, between the races, economic parity between first world and third world countries. So, so what do? You don't believe in astrology, whether it is or it isn't a global elite. I'm not going to get into that conversation.
Right.
But what I am seeing, I think I mean, all the indicators I'm getting with everything's happening with all the demonstrations and what we're seeing politically. And I think that we are experiencing right now the birth of a new world. And birth, if you've ever seen birth, it's bloody, it's painful, it's dangerous, and it's the most effing beautiful thing you'll ever witness. So we are birthing right now.
Lisa Nichols has a beautiful quote, and I don't know if it's hers or not, but she said, like, God gave you a mission and a vision so big that you had to birth. What about that did you think was going to be easy?
Yes. Amen.
And I'm like, wow, she nailed it. Like,
I mean, I think on the other side, before we're born, we think, yeah, I can do that. I can handle it. And then we get down here, and if we've chosen a challenging life, which many of us have, sometimes we just, hold our arms up and go, what was I thinking? Like, what was I thinking? What am I doing here? But at the end of the day, it's a beautiful place with beautiful people. And now, living in this time especially, maybe, just maybe, we can add our little bit to make a difference and make it a better place to live for everyone.
I like hearing that, because I've been doing a lot of interviews. Like, I know we had a peaceful protest here in Grand Rapids, and it turned into not so peaceful later in the evening. But I got a chance to go down there and interview people, and just ask what they were standing there for, and what message they were trying to carry forward. And then after the riots and after all the destruction on Saturday night, Sunday went down there. Everybody that was there rebuilding I didn't want those messages to get lost, so got to ask a lot of people about the messages that they were carrying forward, what they didn't want to get lost. And hope has been such a big one. And not just hope, because I finally feel like we're moving into action, because everybody has been impacted. There's nobody on the earth that hasn't been impacted from COVID.
Right.
Our world has changed, and it needed to be something that big to shift us and to move us in a new direction. And hope seems to be still the number one message. And then moving that into, what's my responsibility in this? What can I contribute to this? And how can I impact? Taking that on an internal, that's what I see other people doing too, is they're taking that on an internal responsibility, and then standing up and speaking out about how, just change and better ways forward for all of us.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because, there have been numerous studies that show the difference between how people perceive things like politics, their worldview. And then it really comes down to how they process this information, whether they process it with the amygdala or with the neocortex. So neocortex thinkers are looking for progress. They rely on hope. Amygdala thinkers are very fear-based because everything's black and white, good or bad, right or wrong, very authoritarian, inclined towards authoritarianism. I mean, the amygdala and the neocortex are important for all of us to process with. But I think what that information gives us is the opportunity to really self-reflect and go, how do I process things? Because human beings don't make good choices out of fear.
No,
I mean,
never.
historically, we make horrible choices based on fear. We can make really stupid mistakes based on hope too. I mean,
Absolutely. I agree.
But on the balance, I would rather hope than fear.
That's been pretty much my motto when anytime that I have stepped out of my comfort zone and into hope is I would much rather fail falling as a fool for hope than a fool for fear.
Yeah.
And you do. And I think one of the things that's just amazing about playing the character that you play, and being able to do a little research, like you doing the getting into stunts and your path that you've chosen to just keep getting better, really speaks in your word, it speaks in your intention, it speaks in your conversation. But tell me a little bit about like how you had to get there, because I know like when we had the conversation before, like you've definitely taken more than your fair share of lumps, and literally and willingly to, progress yourself in being an actor and getting into that life.
I think, I mean, I've come to the place where I see my obstacles as my allies. In retrospect, when I look back at my life, I think like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I was the third from the smallest kid in 8th grade. I was the smallest kid on the 10th grade football team. I mean, I was picked on a lot in 7th and 8th grade. Didn't really have friends. I mean, I had 6 brothers, so I had friends, but I can't name one person who was my friend in grade school.
Okay.
And I was picked on, but I started martial arts in 7th grade. And after a couple of fights, I didn't get picked on anymore because I started picking up my skill level. And so then, I've done 5 years of this art and 8 years of this art and 2 years of this art. And I've trained with world champions. I have several friends who are world champions. I've trained with special forces guys who are friends. So those guys that picked on me when I was a little kid, I actually owe a debt of gratitude to, because I learned to fight. Not that I'm not a world champion myself. I'm not claiming to be this stellar martial artist, but I do know enough, and I have enough decades of experience to know how to handle myself. And so this gave me the ability to make a living. I knew I was going to be a filmmaker. I knew I was going to be an actor. I didn't know that I was going to do stunts. And it was a coach I had. I was doing a play called Requiem for a Heavyweight. It was Rod Serling play. And I met a coach who had lectured at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He became my coach, and he got me an audition for the live Conan show at Universal Studios. Mm-hmm. And so to be a double swordsman. And even though I'd done tons of martial arts, I hadn't, and boxing and all kinds of fun stuff, I hadn't done swords. But when I went to, he sent me to a guy to sort of refine my sword fighting techniques. And after an hour, the guy's like, dude, you've done this before. I mean, some past life. So, I can't teach you anything. As far as for what you need to do, you're fine. So that's sort of opened the door to acting and stunts. And then, I had a fun career. My friend Brian, the astrologer, I met him in my 20s, but at 32, he gave me a reading, and he told me a bunch of things that, it was amazing how much he knew about me. But one of the things he said was, well, you're not really your big stardom, like your impact on the planet, the fulfillment of yourself as a creator, as an artist, is not really going to happen until your late 50s, early 60s. No, it's going to be early 60s. And I remember going, dude, you have no idea who I am. I've been on a soap opera. I've been on a nighttime soap. I've started a movement. Dude was right. He was right. And so through it all, it came to a place where And, through no fault of my own, but the only thing my buddy told me was going into this 10-year period is like, it was going to be, I was going to become the Grim Reaper. And I went through a period where about 13 people close to me passed away. Many of them I was with right before. And during that exact same time, and some of those people that were passing away were people I was doing business with. We had like $1 million deals coming together for production company and films. And then people were just started dying. And so in that period, I lost everything. People were dying. A 12-year relationship was redefined. We're still very good friends, but she and I are, um, um, I ended up, like I was out of money. I was eating on an EBT card. I actually drove an Uber for a short while to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And, some very well-meaning people were encouraging me to do this or that, but I knew in my heart that whatever mission is laid out in front of me on this planet, for whatever reason I'm here, I felt very solidly that film was the place I needed to be. And so I things started turning around for me. I moved back to South Carolina, got a little place, bought a little place, and things just started turning around. And I've noticed in my life that just allowing things to come as opposed to reaching for things, I find when I reach for things or I go after things, they don't happen. And so, as far as this role goes, I mean, I got a call from the stunt coordinator and who I'd known for 30 years. I'd never worked for. I'd worked as an actor on things that he had coordinated, but we'd never worked together other than that. But he called me and said, "Hey, we're making the next Halloween." And I was like, "Awesome, man. Good for you. That's gonna be a lot of fun." He's like, "Yeah. Well, anyways, I read the script and I told Malik Akkad, the owner of the franchise, and David Gordon Green, the director, he said, this script is not like any other script. You're going to need a guy with really deep acting chops and who's a really good stuntman." And David was like, "Well, yeah, and he needs to be 6'3", 200 pounds and in his 60s. Do you know anybody?" And Ron was like, "Yeah, I know one guy." So, so it was almost like this was meant to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do believe this was meant to be. And my buddy Brian was right. This is all the creative fulfillment from playing this role is unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I've had a lot of joy and a lot of beautiful experiences doing what I do for a living. But if I hadn't, and I've always been a compassionate person, I've always been a spiritual person, but I think going through the loss that I went through, all the death, losing all that money, eating on $6 a day on an EBT card, which is not freaking easy, right? I mean, those kinds of things test your mettle and make us go deeper into who we are. And then we have to define for ourselves, like, what am I going to be? What am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
And that brought me here.
Well, and I think that that's such a good message too, since everybody has been impacted by COVID. And for some people, I was kind of shocked to hear that for some people, this was their first time ever having something like this happen to them. And in a way, in my life, I'm like, well, everything that I've ever been through has been preparing me for this. And instead of going to that fear base, it was a time where, the people that, had grit and resilience and everything like that and knew what that was, like, I feel like those people are really like standing up in some way now and standing up to become something better, to become something better for the world. And I think that that's a great message for anybody that's listening to this, that's had their normal disrupted, that's had life happen on top of this, because life happens. And I just, with listening to those hardships, like, you were also physically beaten. Like, I mean, like there's points, I'm sure, like there was a couple things that I read about, like, you actually like getting injuries and the injuries that you sustained going through this. Like, what, like, where do you have to draw from to be hurt or be exhausted? Like, there was a scene that you said that you played when it was like horrible weather outside when you were shooting Halloween, and you stayed outside in this cold to like in this harsh experience because you were trying to be like, you were becoming this character.
Yeah, that was the opening. And it was shot in the courtyard of, or the marching grounds for, at the Citadel, which was, it's a military.
So where do you now go to? Is it not that it's easy, but have you just done it so much in your life now, going to that hard place for the pursuit of, raising the level? Or is there a place that you go to that you have to draw from this energy, like to grit it out?
No, it's definitely an inner place. It's a
Okay.
deep place. And so, then it's beyond duality. It's beyond judgment. So, discomfort, pain, those kinds of things cease to matter. They just are. They're just a part of the experience. Then they inform the experience. So that's why I chose. It was 28 degrees. I think the wind chill was like 8 degrees. The wind was whipping off the Charleston Bay and right down into the courtyard, and it was cold. I was hacking up green crap for about 2 weeks afterwards. I mean, it was. I definitely took a beating on that, but it was worth it because everything we created. I think when we look at that opening scene and the energies between Rhiannon and Bob and myself and the inmates and the camera and all those little things were in part informed by how uncomfortable it was. I mean, it was freaking cold.
When I read that, I was like, and he willingly did that. That's why I've just been so amazed by listening to, the disciplines that you've gotten into, the things that you've chosen to study. Because I feel like you would have to have that type of mental conditioning to willingly put yourself in those situations to come together and tell this story. And not only are you telling this story, but you're telling a legendary story. So that just ups the ante right there.
But I think from the point of view of playing that character or playing any character, it's about being. So applied kinesiology, muscle testing, chiropractors do it, naturopaths do it, some acupuncturists do it. So a man named David Hawkins, MD, PhD, wrote a book called Power versus Force, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And he eventually started using applied kinesiology to muscle test to approximate or the level of consciousness of anything on the planet. And one of the things he discovered was in muscle testing, if you hold your arm out strong and someone's pushing down on it, it's really strong. Someone tells you the truth, your arm will be strong. If they're lying, you push down, it's going to break. It's going to just drop because in our bodies, not just our gut, our entire being knows when we're being lied to or when we're being told the truth. So from an acting or an actor's point of view, and certainly directing and writing, when you tell the truth, Jimmy Cagney said this, all acting is standing on 2 feet and tell the truth. Tell the truth and the audience will be moved by it. They'll go there with you. If you lie to the audience, they're going to know you're lying. And sooner or later, they're going to go, fuck that. I mean, they're going to have enough.
Right.
So it's really about finding those places, like going into that place that is, and for me, especially for a character like Michael Myers, is going to a place well beyond judgment. I mean, we don't judge a cat for killing a mouse. We don't, so I don't think about, people have asked me, oh, what's it feel like playing pure evil? And,
right.
I don't go there.
Right.
I just don't go there. It's about being in a place that's holding an energy. And that energy was first created by John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, and Nick Castle. And then I got to inhabit that space and make it my own with the help of David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and Jamie Lee Curtis and and Ryan and Malik and all the guys who made this all, who built this beautiful castle. So it's a place of isness.
I just think that that's amazing. Is that something that you learned from, and you may have to explain this a little bit if it's explainable, like this family constellation? Is that have to do with this energy
Yes.
that you're talking about tapping into?
Yes, it does. And forgive me if I'm not correct here in terms of what constellation is, because I'm gonna give a 20-cent version, and I may not be completely
Well, that's why I'm letting you do it, because I literally read about it and I'm like, I'm going to have to ask him more about this because.
Okay, so basically there's a Jungian PhD Jesuit priest named Bert Hellinger who went down to South Africa to do his missionary work. And one thing about the Jesuits, unlike many other missionaries, is they absorb knowledge. They've certainly had a checkered past, as any organization has. They've also been almost excommunicated from the church a few times just for being obstinate and being their own Society of Jesus. But the one thing I admire about them is that they absorb knowledge and that they're all educated, PhDs, JD, MD. You know, they're all learned men. So Dr. Hellinger noticed that amongst the Zulu, in the core of their society, they don't pass forth familial pathology the way we do. So if there's divorce in the family, drug addiction, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, like all the things that we pass generation to generation, or that skip generations in our societies, don't happen there. And so he studied them for 20 years and created family constellation therapy. And then it took women coming in who understood trauma to really sort of soften the edges of it and to make it into what it is right now. And all the practitioners I know are all females. Okay. But in the process, a subject will ask people to represent in the group. Would you represent my father? Would you represent my mother? Would you represent my lover, my dog, whatever? And as soon as you enter what's called the morphogenetic field, you'll start downloading information. And so, and it's called representing. So if I'm representing, and literally things have happened, like someone's gotten out in the center of the room, but asked to, I remember this so clearly, asked to represent this woman's grandfather. Mm-hmm. And this person goes out into in the middle of the room and goes, wow, I can't feel my leg. I can't feel my left leg. And she goes, oh, he lost that in the war. That kind of stuff. So you start downloading information. It's completely, you don't filter it. You just, whatever comes to you, you relate. So in that process, I have represented Prime Source. I've represented Archangel Michael, Archangel Metatron. I've represented Lucifer. I've represented Satan. I've represented despots and murderers. And what I discovered from doing all that representing was that it's the same place. It's a place beyond duality. It's a place of non-judgment. It's a place where all that information exists that's been created. And that it's a wellspring of information. We just have to be in the place to allow it to move through us. And that's what creativity is anyhow. Keith Richards, in spite of all the alcohol and all the heroin and all the cigarettes, once I saw in an interview, they're like, how do you do it? And he's like, right, I just get out of the way. I get out of the way and let it come through. And then it's like, yeah, of course. That's the way it works.
Yeah, it is. I feel like I've accidentally tripped and found myself in places of download. And the only thing that stopped it was my ego getting in the way of it for sure.
Boom. And then so what? The amygdala gets afraid, or we get a little too left brain and you start thinking too much as opposed to just trusting. Yeah. But this is where the work comes in, because the work of creating a vessel that's able to do what it is we want to do. A musician doesn't just pick up a guitar and play. There's hours and days and weeks and years of grinding to perfect. And then there's a solid vase or a vase or a structure that inspiration can come through. And then technique, and one of my acting coaches, I studied with Stella Adler, who was Marlon Brando's coach. She was one of the most revered teachers of the day. And Ron Ray was my coach that worked at the Royal Academy. And Ron was the one who was like, he goes, when you're inspired, you're amazing. But we work on technique for the days when we're not inspired, and you got to show up anyhow. So then we create this vessel, the structure, the scaffolding, and we build this whatever it is, whatever this character is, whatever the song is we're playing, and then just allow all that just to, And so when I breathe into this character, I'm in a really deep place, and then I breathe out of it. so that I don't have any judgment on where I just went or what I just did.
So with this technique and learning this technique and getting into this character, is there, like, when you go into that space, is it uncomfortable at all? Like, was it initially uncomfortable, or because there's no judgment, you just are?
Oh man, it's so zen. Like if I could live in that space 24/7, I mean, Dalai Lama would be calling me up for advice, you
I
know?
feel like that's the God space.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it's a place, and it's full and it's empty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
just beautiful.
it's interesting, and with the audience that I think that has been more paying attention now, I've noticed with just how I've grown through my work and how I've grown since I even met you, and wanting to have a conversation like this, I've allowed myself to tap into that space. And I realized that for a long time in my life, I was afraid to say the word God because I was defining it by what everybody else thought of it, and trying to use their language for God. And it was like the last couple weeks when we were supposed to do our interview, instead I ended up going to the park and I was writing out different questions that I wanted to ask you. And all of a sudden this definition just came, and it was, God is the space that holds both the light and the dark.
Oh yeah.
And that's always been God to me. And that space to me is that unconditional love.
So anyhow, the Seth material, Jane Roberts refers to God as he who is all that is and more. So if you think of I mean, I think it's in human nature to anthropomorphize prime source, the creator, however you want to refer to God,
Right.
because our minds are so limited in their understanding of the vast intelligence it took to create the entire universe or universes, not to mention the dimensions that exist within it. And I mean, just the vastness of his intelligence. So I think I think we need to honor each person's perception of God, or if they even choose to acknowledge a God or a universal energy, or, I mean, because all of us are this is a very unique, we're in this together, we're traveling together, but this is a unique and individual journey for each of us.
Yeah.
So it's not up to me to tell anybody what my definition of God is or theirs should be.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, if we're not able to hold that perspective for somebody else, like, first off, if we're not, I think the work is understanding what these things mean for you, and then holding the space for other people's perspective. And when that doesn't align with yours, or if it doesn't align with what you believe, how not to take it personally.
yeah. Yeah. I think because on the balance, you think, I mean, look, politics right now is just filled with so much vitriol and venom and fear and anger and but if you look at it, and I think everybody's experiencing it, they're looking at people we love, family members, friends, who have maybe quite opposite views in this one narrow area.
Right.
But if we look at the balance of who these people are, we're like, I love 98% of you.
Right.
I mean, I can do without that 2%.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think we all need to process on our own and to view the world through a lens that allows for us to learn and grow, and to allow other people to have. I mean, this is why this country is so great. And this is why I think we're on our way to even a better country, because we are allowed to have these conversations and we are allowed to think differently. In fact, we should think differently, because that way we get to talk about things and hopefully create a better union, a better life.
Have you heard of the definition of mastermind, or that third mind? Where, so it's, I'm not going to do this justice, but it's coming when mastermind kind of started taking over marketing, and you started hearing that buzzword mastermind. The definition was that you and I come together, and you've got your mind and I've got my mind, but because we're actually holding the same space together right now, we actually create a third mind where new creativity is born, just because you and I came together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Well, and how amazing would it be if we could honor that and acknowledge that?
Well, we do. I mean, here's the thing is, like, um, if the world operated like the movie sets did on Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, I mean, you have 120 people out there working. Everybody's doing their job. I mean, there's so much love, so much support, so much respect. Like if I'm in the dressing room and the director David wants me, I'll get a knock at the door and someone will say, "David has invited you to the set." The word will be, David will say, "Please invite James to the set." And it's always good morning. They have 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night. When you show up at a movie set, it's good morning. Everybody says good morning to each. There's always a lot of thank yous. There's always, and so I think when you get, you're right. I mean, when people are gathered together in a creative force and it's done with love and respect, I mean, we knew we had something special. And part of it was because of the way everybody worked together, because of the love and respect and passion that everybody shared. And yeah, there's going to be tough days. There's going to be, but at the end of the day, I think we can more and more and more grow a society that operates like that, community that operates like that.
So you brought up a really good point about community and working on a set with 120 different human beings, all having different lives, coming together to one bigger vision. Like, what were some challenging moments where people had to maybe step back and adjust or be flexible, or when did something happen that was unexpected that the team had to come together and deal with the unexpected together?
Well, I mean, first of all, filmmaking is an exercise in problem solving. I mean, every day, stuff is going to go wrong every single day. And, every day you have storyboards and shot lists and scene lists, and you know what you're going to do. And then something happens, something breaks. Maybe you realize something's not working, and all of a sudden the director's sitting there tapping away on his computer, writing a new scene in the moment because he knows this is not working. So really, you go to work expecting that.
Okay.
It's rare that it's smooth.
Okay.
It's rare. It's rare that something doesn't go wrong. So it's really all. I mean, that's the fun part of it.
Okay.
Because you're constantly on your creative game, or you get bit.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure you don't get to that level without having an understanding that comes with the job and that comes with the territory of making something great together.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think so I guess, so the new movie, is that still being released this year?
As of now, I think it's October 15th.
October 15th. Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. And we just don't know. I mean, but as of now, I'm slated to go to premieres in like New York, Europe, South America, Japan, Australia. So right now we're supposed to be doing premieres and it's supposed to be released. And then as of right now, we will either be shooting Halloween Ends, either shooting that at the end of the year or the beginning of next year. And that's all contingent upon things we can't see right now.
Now, have you, not being able to do your normal of going to conventions and those gatherings, like you said, you've been doing a lot of inner reflection. Like, have you, I guess, have you gotten into anything that you normally wouldn't get into because of this?
No, I think it's more that I'm taking the time now to make some decisions in my life, and in terms of application of energy, application of resources, the people in my life and how those relationships are defined, to look at what is, because I'm looking, I mean, I'm young and I'm vital and I'm healthy and I'm very, very blessed that way. But, the simple truth is I'm not going to be here forever. And, I'm 63 years old. So I may have 20, I may have 50 years. I mean, my lifeline wraps around the back of my hand, but that doesn't matter because I ride a motorcycle without a helmet. And, and so.
Well, and no time is ever guaranteed, right? Like,
yeah, it's not. And so, at this point in the game, and I think this is probably natural for anybody and everybody at some point in their life, and I'm looking at it, or maybe multiple times in their lives, but I'm looking at it and going, how am I going to maximize my stay here? Now, where can I apply myself? And I'm not really, and the answers haven't come necessarily.
Okay.
But what I have done is start cleaning out my closets. I started removing, and doing practices like EMDR, where I'm reprogramming my mind, and you know what I mean. So there are certain things that I spend every day on a pulsing electromagnetic field mat. I use a scalar laser on my injuries. I mean, I had multiple surgeries in this hand from going through a glass window, and I've had knee surgery, and I've had all these places in my body, and I'm doing myofascial release physical therapy. So I'm what I'm doing is taking this time to bring back the vitality and strength and balance that I think I'll need to step into the next level of whatever it is I'm here to do on this planet.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that when you're talking about that book, Power versus Force, not only are you a big build, like you're a larger build, you're definitely standing next to somebody that, you can easily tower over somebody, in my opinion. But when I picked you up when we were Ubering, you've got this quiet energy that just lives within you. And I'm excited to see what you decide to get into next. Are you wanting to still do acting? Has that changed at all? Or has it been more of opening up to just whole new possibilities?
Well, the acting, I had made a decision back when everything was really hitting the fan. People were dying. Everything was just going away. That's when I really came to terms with the fact that everything in my life that's ever worked has been because I did the work that I needed to do, and then opportunity was brought to me.
Yeah.
So at that point, I made the decision that I love being in front of the camera. I love being in front of the camera. I love the minutia of doing stunt works, especially fighting, and how exacting you have to be. I love the depth of spirit that you have to embrace to be on your game as an actor. I love working with creatives. David Gordon Green is the best director I've ever worked with too, because his ego was just checked at the door. And so there's a bunch of kids in there playing in a sandbox, building really cool shit. So, for me, I just said, okay, I'm if it comes to me, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'm focused on writing and I have a coming of age story of a high school soccer player that's been very, very well received by Academy level people. And a couple times I've gotten very close to getting it financed. This COVID thing kind of just, we're dealing with some German financiers, and because of this COVID thing, that just kind of went away. But so at this point in the game, I have had a couple of offers after the last Halloween, and they just didn't fit what I envision myself doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm lucky enough at this point in the game to be comfortable enough that I can accept offers that I think are exciting and challenging and beautiful. And I can, say kindly, but thanks, but no thanks to things I don't find interesting. But I'm primarily focused. So I'm not pursuing my career as an actor. I'm allowing that just to unfold as it is. And I am working on getting my films made, because I think that's where I can make some real impact.
Okay.
And a couple $100 million.
I mean, well, and I absolutely love that you're well versed in a lot of different areas. I mean, you can tell the journey through your life. When you're talking about being bullied and not having a lot of friends, and just building discipline on that, I just think that opens up this time for you for that impact, to just take that to a completely another level.
Well, I think when my Alan Vint was one of my mentors, and he's one of the people that passed away during that dark period. Alan was like the next Steve McQueen. If you see him on Panic in Needle Park, is a great example of his work with Dustin Hoffman. One of the things he taught me as an actor and as a writer was to take everything from personal experience. Don't make shit up in your head. There's enough around us in real life to draw from.
Yeah.
So and that goes back to telling the truth. If you're telling the truth because it really happened, then that's going to resonate in an audience. And so, a lot of my experiences, I mean, in my story, there's a different scenario. The family structure is different. There's all these things happening that never happened in my life. But everything that happens in the script happened to somebody I know, you know. So then I just, it's like playing Mr. Potato Head, you know, you just
You
put the
put the
ears on.
pieces together.
And so I do very much believe that the right investors and the right team is going to come together, and we're going to make this film. And and I believe that we're going to make impact. I think, okay, so Alan directed a little film with his friend Jimmy Petula, and it's called Reversal, tiny little wrestling film. It made a bunch of money on. It was one of the first films to make money on the internet, and went to theaters. Then it got on DVD. A bunch of Olympic athletes supported it, but Alan got over 1,000 letters. It was a father and son story. And he got over 1,000 letters from people saying, you know, my husband and son haven't spoken in 7 years, but after we watched your movie, my husband and son have a relationship again. And Alan was like, you know, fuck the money, man. Shoot me in the head. I've done my job. This is what I was here to do. I've done my job. And he did. And then he died. You know, I'd like to do my job a few more times before I die, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's my goal. I was like, if for this film, if one person walks out of every theater changing their idea of how they treat their child, or how they love and support another human being, or how they react to their own pain, you know, then I'll have done my job.
Well, and I hope that the audience really gets the power that one can have to impact, and what James was talking about as far as not reaching, like opening yourself up and allowing. That's been the whole process of how you and I met.
Yes.
You know, it was love and a whole lot of faith, and taking steps in a story for a bigger vision that I've been trying to create, allowing that intuition to tap into it and follow it, and just walk in it instead of like trying to control it. And even up to like having our past, you know, like in October, trying to do that interview, and we got on the phone and the tech didn't work and it screwed up. And then, you know, your busy schedule and all of this is just such a good reminder. First off is just, you guys never know. Like, first off, you never know the next conversation that you're going to have. You're never going to, like, you never know the next person that you meet until you're willing to open yourself up and to have a conversation and to get to know the other person. Because you have changed my life, because when I met you, I did not have a podcast. I was very, very not knowing what I was doing in a lot of areas. I had hope and a mission and determination. And so now, leveling up a little bit, I'm so glad that you helped me create this platform, because I wanted to have a platform to have a conversation with you, so other people could experience the level of conversation that I had with you that first time.
Oh, that's cool. Well, thank you.
It was so awe-inspiring. I mean, how many times in your life can you say, like, I literally wanted to kidnap Michael Myers, and I could have driven around with you for hours because of our 10-minute conversation.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. And that's what I love about the cons, is because I met you because I was at a con Grand Rapids. And so, I mean, that's what I love about the conventions, is we get these moments, and they're brief and fleeting, but we get these moments to genuinely connect with really special, beautiful human beings. And then because of this experience, I get to, you know, look at the world, and I've been to many places in the world. Like, I get to look at the world and go, wow, the world is filled with really beautiful people. Rich people, poor people, big people, small people, every ethnicity, sexual orientation. You know what I mean? And it's like, and you know, when I see on one hand the chaos and the anger and the fear, and on the other I see the coming out of all the things that are happening right now in our world. I really believe that we are heading towards a finer, more beautiful, more compassionate place. And it's these moments, right? And you're right. If we leave ourselves open, like a smile, opening the door for somebody, I mean, you know, and for me, I mean, I'm half Irish, man. You know, like I've had a little bit of temper, you know, once or twice in my life, and you know, like evolving to the place where, you know, instead of taking something personally or being agitated by something, realizing that we never know. I mean, this is cliche, but we never know what kind of pain somebody else is in when they're being rude to us or being offensive, or we don't know how badly abused somebody was when we see that they're violent and angry. And then, like family constellation therapy, this is what it flips the epigenetic switches. So epigenetically, if we're raised in violence, if we've been abused as children, if like the list goes on, those genetic switches are in our DNA. But knowing what we know now about epigenetics, family constellation therapy, brain spotting is another one, that actually flip the epigenetic switches. And so we have within our grasp now the technology to reform and refine what it means to be human. I mean, it's all there.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. And how, do you ever listen to Joe Dispenza?
No, I don't.
Dr. Joe Dispenza. So he puts it so simply as far as connecting the dots with neuroscience and personal growth and this new model of thinking that is happening. Because very simply, and I'm going to dumb this down, just if it's interesting or it resonates with you at all, just go check them out, because I'm going to dumb it down so much. Right. But basically, you have an environmental reaction that creates an emotion, and then the emotion triggers the gene to respond in a specific way. So the new model of thinking is that internally create the event, create the emotion to trigger the gene before the response to it. So the way that they do that is what they're finding, and they've done thousands and thousands of brain scans, is that through elevated intention and elevated emotion, which is gratitude, that they're seeing that when they get people to this particular space and how they get them there, that they're healing their bodies. Because what they're doing is in their brains, because our brains don't know the difference between what's already happened and what we visualize happening. Our body still physiologically responds in the same way, that by creating the higher intention, the high vibrational intention, we're actually creating the future in our brains, because we're creating new neurological pathways. So then when we've got the elevated emotion, that carries us basically right into the future of the level that we just created. So it's like a new way that we're creating a future.
Oh, that's beautiful.
He blows my mind. I mean, it blows my mind that we have this capability, and we're like, science is starting to prove it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like brain spotting, for instance, I've done it many times. And actually, so it's called the Jennifer Aniston effect, where they did brain scans, and every time they'd show a picture of Jennifer Aniston, they noticed the same neuron would fire. So then they finally figured out, oh, wait a minute, there's a neuron for everything. And so, and then they started mapping. And so with this PhD, I'm forgetting his name right now. I saw him give a demonstration, which was brilliant, and really sold me on it. He discovered that so like the short form of this is, you have a practitioner, but we could do this ourselves and say, I was molested by a man wearing a red hat. And every time I see a red hat, I go back to that place of fear and I freeze. So basically, the practitioner will ask you, okay, think about that moment. Okay, where in your body do you feel it? And you'll definitely feel it somewhere. It's going to be somewhere. You identify it. You sit with it for a moment. And then he uses a pointer, but the other practitioners I know don't use pointers. Now they say, okay, fine. And you feel a vision, find wherever that moment is, like find it, and you'll find it. I mean, there'll be a spot somewhere in front of you. There'll be definitely it. And okay, so focus on that, focus on it. Now, think of something really beautiful. Like let's talk, what would you want? You can think about somewhere you've been, a beautiful relationship. I mean, something magical, powerful. Okay, where do you feel that in your body? You sit with that for a little bit. Then you open up to the field of vision. Where do you find that? And you will definitely find a point somewhere in the ceiling, in the wall, something. And okay, so then focus on that for a while. Focus. Then the practitioner will ask you to drag and drop drag from the old spot over to the new spot, just like you're using a mouse. And what happens is the new neuron becomes more powerful than the old neuron. So then when I see a man with a red hat, I'm going to think about hanging out on a beach in Hawaii, not being molested.
Wow.
So I use this in my screenplay about my soccer player. And I was interviewing a woman who, because I just know it applies to everything. So I had a meeting with a female director, really very talented director who may still direct this film. And she was a high school soccer player for her son. She goes, well, when I read the script, I went and got the book on brain spotting in soccer. And I went, oh, there's a book? She's like, yeah, in fact, that's where you get it. I was like, no, I just knew it would work. But here we are. They're already using it for professional athletes to refine their games, to refine. So we're really evolving into a new species. We're creating more brain power. We're taking control over biology. It's exciting.
Amazing. Like, I am so excited to learn more about this. I just wrote it down. The other thing is too, is if you know of anybody that would be open to doing an interview, having a conversation about their field, about their science, anything like that, I would love to talk to somebody about family constellation and somebody that's maybe been practicing it and just their perspective and point of view and working with that. That just blows my mind. I mean, and you think about, I've been studying a lot of what Tony Robbins does with when he started the neurolinguistic programming, and that's kind of how I got into neuroscience a little bit, and just kind of following that path. Man, we just have so much potential as human beings. And where growing up, there was this stuff that I knew that people would literally tell me I was crazy because they would say, prove it. And I'd be like, I can't prove it. But I knew it. Like, I knew it in every single fiber. And so I love that I'm in a time that science is starting to bridge that gap, and bridge the gap really between, what we egotistically know, what we know from our heart space, and then what we know from science, and bringing that all together to tell a new story.
Yeah, I think we're actually well into the event horizon of science and spirituality merging, coming together. I mean, I think for the longest time, scientific method dictated that you didn't pay attention to empirical evidence, and there were so many things we couldn't measure in terms of spirituality, and and the energies that are created when we meditate, when we pray, when all these various aspects, and now they're quantifiable. And so we can actually do statistical analysis and produce data that shows us that these experiences that that are quote unquote spiritual. Like with the neurological work that you've been looking at, is like we understand more about healing now, right? And how much control we really do have over our bodies and the world around us by the way we think. And that's just an ongoing process, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and you just start down the path of I would say probably, 6-7 years ago in my life, I woke up in my life a mess. I'd been running from a lot of things, grew up in a lot of trauma, grew up in a lot of addiction, grew up in a lot of just trying to run from my life, and really like just having this awakening, and the little awakenings that I've had, and breakthroughs that I've had since then. I wish that somebody would have captured my attention when I was 5. I think that this has started my mission to get this kind of science and understanding into our education system, and into our business system, and into all of these different systems. So at least we can have, that we can understand where it's coming from, and not just be so, what have I been called? Hippy dippy. I'm, my hippie voodoo. I have a good friend he's like, you're just doing your hippie voodoo again. And I'm like, literally, it's just science. I am following the way of love and science, and that's what it's about. but when, you know, like when those kind of connections, when we can start making more of those connections, so it gets relayed in a way, and it gets told in a way that people understand. And that's why I think people like you and people that have the ability to step up and tell a story, that is such a beautiful gift.
I think we all have a story to tell. And you know, I think the importance of a story, I think, is when we share a story to other people who can resonate with it, it gives us an opportunity, if we hear someone else's story, to learn from it and grow from it, ideally not to make the same mistakes, and maybe to make choices that are more abundant and relative to our life that we didn't know we could make until we heard someone's story. The other side of it is, like, if I'm not going to go deeply into my pain or my struggle, because it's just a story,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to feed that story.
Yeah.
I don't need to feed that story. And if I find myself feeding a story that's a negative, it's negative dialogue, that's some sort of victim consciousness, and we all have that. You know, we all have that capacity. So it's really about catching ourselves, you know, observing the way we process thoughts. What are our first initial reactions? How do we react to other people? How do we react to, I mean, it's easy to react to people who are nice to us and smiling. I mean, how do we react to people who are not? How do we react to people who are in fear? How do we react to people who are angry? How do we react to people, how do we react to people who we think are making such insane decisions that are affecting everybody? I mean, one of the arts I studied is Aikido. And Moibe Shen, who's Sensei, the man who developed it, called Aikido the loving protection of all beings, including the attacker. So the idea is that, you know, when you're attacked and you use Aikido, which you know, it takes a long time to master and really, I think, as far as Aikido goes, you need other art skills, because there's no offense in Aikido. So you need to go into Aikido with another art already under your belt, or 2 or 3 arts. But the idea being is, if you stay in harmony with the universe, then if that person attacks you, you're just going to take them right into the harmony of the universe, and they're going to be locked out, and then you can have a nice conversation with them because they're immobile. You know, I mean, and it's just really, it's a beautiful, and it's funny because when I was studying it, my dad and I, before he passed, he was a great dad. He was a great dad, but he was a tough guy. You know, he's a stock car racer. He was airborne in Korea. You know, he raised 7 boys, and he, you know, he ran a tight ship. And so I'm the oldest. He and I definitely butted heads. And at some point when I was studying, probably 5 years into studying Aikido, whatever, I had come back home and I was hanging out. He and I got into, we would have gotten into an argument, except I just sort of harmonized. And then I was just walking away. I went, holy shit, I just did Aikido on my dad. You know, like, I didn't take the bait. And instead, I just guided it to a place that was humorous, and, you know, and I went, wow, this is how it works. This is how it works.
Amazing. You Jedi mind tricked.
It worked.
These are not the droids you're looking for. I think it's so amazing. You know, especially somebody like you that has some influence in this world. You know, by your hard work, dedication, commitment, all of those things that it's taken you to get through everything to be where you are. You definitely inspire me, because I feel like people like you that have influence, like, those are the kind of people that should have some influence in this world. And I just love your contribution. I love your responsibility to yourself and keep bringing it to another level. And I absolutely love how open your heart is, and just how amazing, like, you can just have these conversations.
I think this is who we all are, you know, really. I mean, we're in this together. And so I think you're right. Like you said it earlier, the more open we are to meeting new people and having conversations, and just moments of, we don't know unless we open up to it. I actually just read today in my news feed about an African American man in a neighborhood that had slowly become gentrified, and then all of a sudden, they were being posts put on that there was a suspicious black man walking around the neighborhood, and he posted like, "I'm afraid to walk in my own neighborhood now." And so neighbors, responded and said, "Well, I'll walk with you. I'll walk with you. I'll walk with you." And so one day he goes, "Okay, fine, let's do it. Let's meet at this parking lot at 6:00. He gets to the parking lot and there's 75 neighbors. Like, we don't know.
That's awesome.
We don't know how much love we can bring into our lives unless we open ourselves up to it.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolutely beautiful week for that, just even for this podcast, because it's opened up so many conversations with so many different people, and just trying to bring forward their voice in a way that helps us all, in a way that helps us all just kind of be able to either reflect on some things in ourselves, or just have a little bit more grace with everything, have a little bit more compassion, and how we can learn to not bring that judgment into things. And I think that you're an amazing example of that, especially going from extremes. You talk about the perspective of you're just talking about perspectives in kind of knowing the good and the bad of the characters. Like when I went and interviewed a Buddhist monk, there was a picture there and he was telling me the story of this woman that had been taken captive and trying to put Buddhism to me in a way that I could understand it quickly. And he said, "You'll understand this when you know the perspective of the attacker and the attacked."
Right.
When you can hold and carry both perspectives. And just that little thing, I was like, yeah, and
Well, it's interesting because it was Hazel Williams Carter's one of the women I did the most constellation work with, and she really helped me to understand that whenever there's a perpetrator, that perpetrator first and foremost was a victim. You don't get people who are, physically violent or emotionally violent or addicted or whatever without some kind of trauma being perpetrated on them at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of trauma in this world is astounding. So this is where I think compassion needs to come in. I know I've had discussions about legislation when my brother's a politician, and he's a very powerful politician, and he's done. I'm really proud of the work he's done. He and I don't agree on some things, but most things I'm really proud of the work he's done on the environment, and he's compassionate Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I have talked about this is because he's really he's been working to reform education, to take the money out of administration and get it into the schools. And so in this conversation we've had, we were talking about how, if there were over 3 million kids, well over 3 million kids that go to bed hungry every day in this country. And if a kid goes to bed hungry, his brain is not functioning when he wakes up in the morning. And if his brain's not functioning well, he's not going to learn. If he doesn't learn, he's not going to be able to be a viable contributor to society. He's going to fall short, fall by the wayside, and probably slip into addiction or crime because there's no other way.
Right.
And so I think, when we have to look at the root of each issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Where does this drug problem come from, and why are people doing it? Where does this violence come from? And when you look at the, Dylan Roof, who murdered 9 people in a African American church in Charleston a few years back, and I remember his. People say, well, he came from a fine family and they went to church. And I'm like, yeah, but what did they talk about when they were at home? Was he beaten when he was young? I mean, to the point where he was traumatized? Yeah. Did he hear so much hateful rhetoric? This didn't come out of nowhere. But the other side of that was the Cooper River Bridge in Charleston, over the Cooper River, beautiful, beautiful, expansive bridge, was packed with white people and black people in solidarity, in support. You wouldn't have seen that in 1975.
Yeah.
We're seeing it now. And people are finally recognizing, how hard it is to be a cop, how hard it is to be a young black man, how hard it is to, I mean, there's a lot of compassion that we need to spread around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, I was having this discussion today and I said, I think even anybody that gets elected to represent us, or us individually, us as a state, us as a country, us as a world, needs to have a basic willingness to be able to see things from a different perspective.
I think we are, the beauty of this time is that women and women of color are stepping up, and we've needed these voices for a very, very long time. My friend Brian predicted this is back in the morning of 9/11, he predicted a female Teddy Roosevelt in 2020 or 2024, the latest. He's really, really accurate with politics. This may be true or may not be true. I don't know. You know what I mean? But I think what we're seeing is, okay, so my uncle Jim ran guns for the IRA. My mom was a peace activist. So what my mom did, her and her other Irish lady friends, they'd go over to Belfast, get like half Catholic, half Protestant, sometimes as many as 50 kids. They'd bring them over here to South Carolina, and they would give them outward bound programming. And so a Protestant and a Catholic had to be side by side the entire freaking summer. These are kids who would never have met each other.
Right.
There were walls down the middle of the streets. They went to separate schools. They would grow up hating each other, completely with misinformation. Then that program was followed up every week, called Madcap. Every week these kids would get back together. So now 25 years of this program. And overwhelmingly, statistically, these kids who might have polarized into IRA or UDF, who might have been violent, who might have gone into crime or drugs, overwhelmingly these kids grew into successful people and maintained those friendships. And my uncle and my mom used to have arguments about what the right way to do it was. My uncle's point was, the English need to feel our pain, and until we bomb their pubs and bomb their shopping centers, they're not going to know what we're going through. They need to feel our pain. And in the end, my uncle was like, Katie, you're right. You're right. We start with the children. We work with them. We bring them together, because once they come together, they're not going to fall apart. And it worked. It worked. It's the kids that they started working with, 25, 30 years ago, that are now the leaders in their communities, that are now police chiefs and now are lawyers and accountants and have pubs.
That's amazing. There's so much power in that story. There is so much of a role model that we could take in a way as we go forward from here. I can't wait to see how our education system changes because of all that's going on, and I think we're going to be doing the world a better service as we start to educate on these big words of compassion and these big, not just emotions, but how we can start teaching them as a way of abilities that we can build. We all start off with ego. We definitely have those knee-jerk reactions, and kids necessarily don't. I mean, it's a kid's nature. Like, they're just like, if a kid has its own nature, they just help, and they want to be friends, and they've got an innocence to it. And I think it's the ego that tends to teach them otherwise. So anything that allows anybody in any walk of life to just go to a different level, go beyond their ego, there's just so much that opens up when we can allow ourselves to do that. And you were talking about brain spotting. One of the things I've been looking into, and it's just something that I've intuitively known, of how smart our hearts are and the capacity that our hearts have. And I actually got hooked up to a meter, and I don't know the math behind it, but it's called heart math. And so she was explaining, like, when you think of something angry, and then, so she hooked me up to this and she had me do that. And I'm watching it because I wanted to see in my normal meditation where I was in this range and how long I could hold it in this range. And she then said, okay, now think of something that you're grateful for. And so I immediately went to something angry, and then I went to gratitude. And it was like of the map, if I ask somebody else to say, okay, where in this did I think something angry, you can tell.
Right.
Heartbeat, because it's jagged. And then the rest of it is like, so there's so much impact too, that just teaching these little simple things as a foundational for kids. Like, I think that's going to be a way that they just become stronger. And when they can come together in their nature and not be so imposed with separation, I think that's where we're going to really be able to level up as human beings too. And how we can just, as a species, after you're gone, after I'm gone, have us still be here.
Yeah. I really have high hopes
Yeah.
for the species. I think I think David Hawkins in his book Power versus Force talks about how we have reached critical mass in human consciousness, and how because of that we will not destroy ourselves. It was iffy for a time, but he asserts that we've achieved critical mass in consciousness, and that now we're exponentially, and that having to do with certainly with the evolution of people already living, but I think a lot of what it has to do with is the children being born right now. There are so many high conscious children being born.
Yeah.
And we're having to, and then look at all the kids with autism. Well, they're changing the way we understand brains work, and because there's a lot of these high functioning kids on the spectrum are brilliant artists and engineers, and they have such brilliance, but we have to communicate with them in a different way. And so I think we're in the infancy of these beautiful changes, but we get to be alive to see it, man. This is a really important time to be alive.
Well, I was just telling somebody today, I said I was born to live through this. Like, that I just, like, this is the start of everything that I've always known was going to happen as far as a shift. Not knowing what outside circumstance was going to cause it or anything like that, but knowing that there was going to be a catalyst that started, and then just to see the additional things that just keep coming for us to take it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I and thank God for social media.
Right.
We have this at our disposal. I mean, and I think this empowers this. I mean, that was certainly the potential of social media to create havoc is quite evident. Yeah. But this also, I mean, look at the Arab Spring, never would have happened had it not been for social media.
Yeah.
And even though the Arab Spring wasn't perfect, and Egypt has fallen back into totalitarianism, and we still have the ability to communicate. Mm-hmm. And the smaller our world gets in terms of communication and seeing the oneness, and and who we connect with. Like I do this. There's an app called Cameo, and since the cons aren't, I mean, that's been really tough for me not to be able to get out and connect with these beautiful people, and it's because it just feeds me with so much love. But there's an app called Cameo, and so a fan can request a personal message, and it's so cool because I'm talking to people around the world. Like I get to connect with Youngsu in Korea, and Dieter in Germany, and and it's just for a moment, but it's just these moments of connection that we have, and the more connected we become, the brighter this light comes of connection between us, and we're on the path, man.
Well, that is absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait to see what opens up for you. Leaving the audience with one kind of last thing, what has been your greatest lesson that you've learned through this?
Yikes.
Or maybe it doesn't have to be your greatest lesson, but an aha lesson that you've learned going through just the past couple of months.
There was a consciousness I think I carried for a while, and a lot of people who have a tendency towards protection. I have 6 younger siblings. My dad was always super respectful of women, and my dad was always fighting for the underdog. And so I sort of inherited that. My brothers inherited that. And so I think with some people in my life and with things that have gone on, I think this is attributable to a lot of police and firefighters, people who joined the military, preachers. I had this sort of wannabe hero savior complex. Like I invested myself financially and more so deeply emotionally in people's lives to help them and pull them up. And, because I felt like this was my duty as a warrior, as a spiritual warrior. But in this time, I've had the opportunity to look at the cost of that. I mean, not just the application of finances, of course, that's just money management, but how much the emotional toll it would take for me to take on somebody else's karma. And so what I had to look at was, in dealing with other people, certainly be there when I can, love as much as I can. But when it comes to like really intense things going on in somebody's life, I have to hand that over to hands bigger than mine. Yeah. I mean, help when I can, be there when I can, listening is probably the most important thing we can do for people instead of trying to fix them. So that's been the big epiphany for me in this time. It's one of the things I've worked on, and it's really, and so it's changing the dynamic of some of my relationships, and that hasn't been easy either. That's, it's been challenging.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I realized that my energies need to be free to do the work that's in front of me. And that all these other people that I know or people that I've been involved with are remarkably talented and beautiful. And that's why I invested myself in them. And now it's time for them to fly on their own. Yeah. It's time for me to fly on my own. I've got it. And that's kind of a control issue. Everybody has control issues.
Yeah.
That's one of my control issues. And so I'm letting go of my need for anybody to be what I think they need to be, and embracing the fact that everybody's going to be who they are. It's so Nelson Mandela quoted Marianne Williamson in his inaugural speech, and forgive me if I don't get it correctly 100%, but he said, as we release ourselves from our own fear, we automatically give everyone around us permission to release themselves from their fear too. And so I think that you can extrapolate that as we find our own grounded sense of love and compassion, we automatically give everyone around us permission to find that same space. As we take control of our own and discipline ourselves, whether we quietly discipline ourselves physically or with diet or meditation or whatever it is, exercise, as we just live that, we automatically give permission to everybody around us to find that space too. And so I think that's a more effective way of walking forth. And I definitely got that from this time.
That's amazing. That's an amazing lesson and an amazing thing to be able to reflect on and carry forward. And what a beautiful message. What an absolutely beautiful message. Well, I would not be forgiven if I didn't ask you, could you give my friend Dylan James a shout out?
Yo, Dylan James, what up?
He's one of your biggest fans, and about fainted when I told him that I had you as an Uber ride, and he wanted me to ask you some questions, which I think we did get to cover too. So, and then the best way that we can support you, would that be going to Cameo?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because it's a beautiful, so like, if a fan's having a birthday or Father's Day or whatever like that, it's just a great way to request a personal message for somebody, and then Instagram and Twitter, just keep a little stuff flowing there. But yeah, it's really nice to connect.
It's I know that this has been kind of a long time in the making, and just speaks to when you're reaching for something. If it doesn't work out the way that you want to the first time, first off, don't give up, because that's going to happen a lot. that's going to happen, where things don't work out in your timing. They work out in a timing that's bigger than yours. And just to be able to sit in front of you and be able to see your face and be able to have this conversation, you literally have just made my day. And I know that you're going to, like, Dylan is going to just be so happy that you gave him a shout out. And anybody that's listening is going to just be better off for listening for it. So,
well, I really appreciate what you were doing and your path to getting to this point, because I think, you know, like hard work, talent, you know, those are really, really important. Being able to learn and morph and grow in that process. But at the end of the day, persistence is omnipotent.
yeah.
Persistence is the thing that gets us to where we want to go. And if you're not persistent, if I'm not persistent, which I was,
Yeah.
and I still am,
Yeah.
and you are, this is why you're here. Persistence is what's going to make us separate the people who truly want something and the people just kind of want something. You know what I mean? So if we persist and learn and grow, we are going to get there. And I swear to God, as I look in the rearview mirror of my life, the highway is littered with bodies of people who just quit too soon.
Yeah.
You know? So, like, okay, so we have a goal. We want an experience. We want to do a certain thing, and we need to make a living while we're doing that. Well, freaking make a living and do what you want to do. You know what I mean? And we live in a great age too, where we can be anything. When we can reverse course at 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years old, we can just change everything and we don't live in our grandparents' world.
Yeah.
You know, so man, you did it. I did it. Like, for anybody who hears this, if there's something you want to do, man, do it. Yeah. Just do it, and do it again and again and again.
Yeah. Don't wait for anybody else to give you permission, man.
No, I use that in my screenplay. It's all about giving oneself permission.
Yeah.
It's about giving ourselves permission, because if we wait for the world to give us permission, it may not happen.
Yeah. Well, you and I will definitely keep in touch, because I want to be such a support for you in your next projects, your next adventures. I want to make sure that I can help share what you're doing with this audience as well. And I just really, really want to thank you so much. I know you're so busy. Thank you for showing up today, and thank you for just opening your heart to this conversation.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it. And it's been great staying in touch with you as well, and having this time together.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Well, I'll make sure that I will get your contact information to Cameo, and I'll make sure that I get all of your information, you guys. So if you wanna check out kind of the schedule and to see what's going to be happening with the new Halloween movie, and just see where that's going to be at, you can follow James, and he'll let you know. And if you want to see, if you just want to support his mission and see his new projects come to fruition as well, likes, comments, love, it's all appreciated, especially in this world where we've got these major industries. Our entertainment industry is taking a huge, huge hit right now, you guys. So we need to support in every way that we possibly can. So I ask that you do your part in sharing this and just extending our reach.
Nice.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well, my dear. Look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thank you.
Much love.
Much love to you too, hon.